It's almost universal, whether it's 2 wheels, 4 wheels, 18 wheels, no wheels. So many of us have a special memory involving a vehicle or a story about a car we've loved. Even if you can't tell a crankshaft from a drive shaft, I want to hear the story of the vehicle that moved you. I'm Blake Jackson, and this is Auto-Biography. All right, next guest on the Auto-Biography podcast. It's singer, songwriter, producer, guitarist, raconteur, radio host, father, grandfather, great-grandfather. It's Randy Bachman. Mr. Bachman, please tell us about the vehicle that moved you.
The most expensive and coolest car I ever had, I bought from my doctor. I had an issue with a gallbladder, and he drove up to treat me at a house I was staying at. And as he gave me a shot of Demerol, passing out, I said, "I want to buy your car." And it was a 1954 Rolls Royce Silver Dawn.
Stopping for a second to tell you about the 1954 Rolls Royce Silver Dawn. A mere 760 of these were produced between 1949 and 1954. Available with both automatic and manual transmission, the car in question came with a 4.6-liter inline-six engine. Topping out at 94 miles an hour, getting an average of 12 miles a gallon, Rolls-Royce Silver Dawn came direct from the factory, believe it or not, with a trunk full of Grey Poupon.
It was in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, but he had imported it from Scotland, and it was beautiful. There's a picture of it on the Bonnie and Delaney live album. It's Bob Dylan with his cowboy boots sticking out the window, and I had that for many, many years. It was a wonderful car with little wings that came out between the doors, that, you know, little lit up arrows.
Yeah.
Beautiful leather inside. The heaters were into the front seats, so they blew into the front and the back. The problem with it was I couldn't take it anywhere. Guys would want to key it, you know, and scratch it all the time. So I only took it on round trips with my kids in the back. And we'd go through like a McDonald's drive-in in a Rolls Royce, and they'd use the car. Literally, I couldn't park it on the street.
People were jealous.
Yeah, they were. Now it's much different. There's much more appreciation of these old cars, and you could actually fix them. I went in one guy was restoring it and fixing them to have like a real carburetor, not a fuel injection, to have a real car that's not a computer, right, where they know where you're going and they can control your car and speed it up or crash you, whatever they want. It was a wonderful car.
Yeah. I read that you also you donated a 65 Thunderbird to a museum.
I did. Burton Cummings collected those 64s and 65s, and he was going through a changeover of house and moving, and he had 3 or 4 of them. And he drove one up to my house in White Rock. He lived in LA at the time. We were doing demos, and I loved this car. And when he went back home, he said, "Look, you liked it so much, do you want to buy it? By the way, your wife, when she was moving it in the driveway, put a big scratch on it so you could buy it scratched." So I bought it, and it was incredible, but I also couldn't use it. You know, by the time I could afford a T-Bird or a Corvette, my family was so big I couldn't take them anywhere. I mean, basically for a single guy or a guy and his girl. And so I ended up donating it to the museum in Ottawa, where they wanted to have the Museum of History of Rock and Roll Cars. And so this car was previously owned by the Doors Road, Ray Manzarek's Road guy in the Doors, and then Burton Cummings bought it. So I had all this provenance. Then it was listed in my name. So we donated it. But at the time that I was doing it with Burton Cummings, I was doing demos of an album. And we did it in the digital, and then I sold the digital machine. So there was no mixes of this album that existed. And when Burton was sold me the car, I took it I lived in BC. I took it to Victoria, BC, where the head of the Thunderbird Club was, to restore it. And when he opened the trunk, he said, "There's a little box in the back with a tape in it." And I said, "Wow." And it was a high 8 tape. Back then in the late 90s, you could mix to digital and high 8 tape if you had the camera, right, because of digital sound. So I had to go and try to find a high 8 player. And when I did, we were able to play that album. We put it out called the Thunderbird Tracks. So it's 10 demo songs that Burton Cummings and I wrote and demoed that didn't exist until we found them in the trunk of this Thunderbird. So you can Google that, the Thunderbird Tracks, Bachman Cummings. And we wrote some follow-up songs. There's a song called The American Dream, which is a follow-up to American Woman. And this is like done in the mid 90s as compared to American Woman was in the late 69.
Now, a lot of people have the idea that touring as a rock and roll band is always about luxury and the finest accommodations. Going way back on your first tour, what was the vehicle like? What was the touring situation?
You had pretty much a loaner car because you couldn't afford your own. So you had a friend or you had a father. I had a father that had a 59 Plymouth station wagon that we actually had a roof rack. Luckily, we'd put our suitcase on the roof rack. In the back, we would jam in drums and an amp. Have 4 or 5 guys. Then you had a bench seat in the front and behind it, all in one car, driving to a gig, setting up your own gear at about 6:30 or 7, having a bite or a candy bar or something, playing your gig till midnight, packing it up in the car, going to a hotel if you were lucky, getting a room with 2 beds and a cot. And when you did the flip, the winner got the cot, so the other 2 guys had to sleep together, or else you slept in the car in 2 or 3 hour things. And one guy would stay awake and keep the driver awake. 2 or 3 would sleep in the back just with your hands crooked on pillow to drive to the next gig 400 or 500 miles. And when you're in Canada, the gigs literally are 300 and 400 miles apart, which isn't bad in the summer, but our seasons here are like 6 months of winter and 6 months of non-winter.
Yeah.
So it's not the luxurious life. The luxurious time is 90 to 120 minutes on stage when you are Elvis or you're John Lennon or you're Elton John, whoever you are, you're Lady Gaga if you're a lady, or Madonna. That's your glory moment, and the rest of the time is just painful. Imagine when you go on a vacation with your family. You have a whole bunch of good days and then a whole bunch of bad days. Somebody gets sick, the bad hotel room. That happens every day on the road. You have a bad hotel room or somebody's sick, and you got a crew of 4 or 5 or 6 guys. Like I said, your glory moments are when you're on stage, and after that, it's heavy lifting and ditch digging.
When you are out there, I mean, a lot of this was before the age of iPods or iPhones or anything like that. How do you occupy yourself when you're on the road that much?
Well, then the TV also went off at midnight after Johnny Carson. There was no TV. We had 2 or 3 channels back then. We used to read the phone books.
Oh.
And we would look for stupid names. So Burton Cummings and I would just sit there and say, look up this name. You try to look up names that are the same. So we found a guy in Toronto. His name was Xanathon, which then X, Zajoules, Xaujou, and he was a real guy. He was Greek or Turkish. So we had this name. We wrote down these names, or we tore out the page of the phone book. And I remember we got to Toronto. Burton Cummings actually phoned Exagies, and he said, "Hi, is this X?" And the guy goes, "Yeah, this is X." And he goes, "You're at the top of our name on the weird name list books. We collected names from all over America." And I still remember all these names. Most of them were like a double H, like Harry Houdini or Xanathon Zazajules or Z-Zik or something like that. And that's how we occupied our time. We had nothing, and we wrote songs. And basically, there was a lot of travel because there was no tour buses then. You had to do it in a wagon, or you had a van for your gear with a roadie or a road manager driving, and you went in the wagon and you drove together. Sometimes you'd get to the gig, and the truck wouldn't show up because they had a flat tire. He'd get to the gig and set up, and you'd have a flat tire. So we ended up trying to get a little old school bus and drive in that. And when those broke down, they broke down. I mean, the days of tour, now traveling is fantastic, really. Guys have private jets. Then we used to save our money to phone home once a week to talk to the wife and kids because the phone bill was terrible. Yeah. The hotel added surcharges on it. Now you can tell your kids bedtime stories on a Zoom as if you're in the room. Things have really changed. And also waking up at 2 a.m, saying, where in the flip are we? And getting a road map and a flashlight. Now with direction and GPS and everything, it's unbelievable. Traveling, it's just way, way better. So there's ups and downs as the times have changed.
So when I guess back then and even now, are there essentials or rules for going on a tour that you have to stick by to make a successful tour?
Yes, I've never been a drinker or smoker, so I don't like that on my bus. It's not a party time. It's where I live. Mm-hmm. Well, everyone knows where my bunk is. I know where everyone's bunk is. Sometimes you got a bus for the crew and a bus for you. Whatever the crew does, they can do in their bus. I don't care. I'm not a snob that way. But where I am, I want peace and quiet. One thing I've tried to do on the road, no matter where I am, is to try to get at least 6 hours of good sleep. because you can't catch up on lost sleep. And if guys are going crazy, it just doesn't work. And you're going to take your own pillow, or else you get a bad neck. You know what I mean? You get a creak neck.
Yeah.
And you take your own vitamins, and you take you take your. Here's what's funny: when you see a band, Aerosmith or anybody, or BTO or anybody, getting ready for bed, what guys wear to bed is unbelievable. Sweatpants, flip-flops, an old sweatshirt, something you've had since you were young. That's like your little blankie. That's your little comfort thing. And if you should see us dressed up for going to bed, we just like look at each other and go, "Are you kidding? You actually wear wool socks to bed?" Yeah, I like my feet to be warm, and I like to be barefoot because I like to stick my foot out of the covers, and it climatizes my whole body if I'm sticking my head out or my foot out. So what guys wear to go to sleep is really a scream.
I hadn't pictured that before, but now it's going to be in the back of my mind. That would make for a cool album liner picture, I think.
It would. Here's us going to sleep in our tour bus, and you have like Steven Tyler in a girl's nightie or something, or dressed up like a Dream of Jeannie, because he dresses like that anyways a lot of times on stage.
Hey, I was doing some research leading up to this, and I read at one point you were writing a musical. Is that still in the works?
Well, it was, but it fell apart. I work on a bunch of things at one time. What we're working on right now is a rockumentary, because my Gretsch guitar, my 1957 Gretsch orange guitar that I bought when I was about 19 or 20. I bought one from a music store in Winnipeg. Neil Young bought the one next to me. He still got his. Mine was stolen from the hotel room in 1976 in Toronto from a Holiday Inn. But I had written and played These Eyes, Laughing, She's Come Undone, No Sugar, No Time, American Woman, Let It Ride, Taking Care of Business, Hey You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. Every single song was written on that song guitar, and it was stolen. I searched for 50 years, and only in the last 2 years, Tal and I were doing a live YouTube called our Friday Night Trainwreck. We used to get together every 6 o'clock on Friday nights and try to stump each other playing songs, and it was an absolute train wreck of like Wayne's World, where nobody knew what they were doing. And the guy sent us a little note on the side of the screen when you're doing it live saying, "I found your stolen Gretsch." So when we were done the podcast, we called this guy, and he had nothing to do because of the COVID shutdown. He had Googled the BTO looking out for number one, where I'm playing the Gretsch, and froze a picture of me playing the orange Gretsch guitar. Then he Googled everything sold on the internet in the last 15 years that was an orange Gretsch, and he found my Gretsch. So I said, "How did you do this?" And he said, "Well, it took me 2 months." He didn't have facial recognition. He just took every picture of every Gretsch, and the grain matched. And he found it with a guy in Japan whose name was Takeshi. He's a rockabilly guy, kind of like Brian Setzer, but he's Japanese. He doesn't even speak English. He sings everything in phonetically. And he sent me a video of this guy singing 2 Christmases ago, rocking around the Christmas tree. And when the guy was there, he was playing my guitar. So I'm very lucky. My son Tal has a Japanese partner. His name is Coco. So I said to Coco, "Okay, you've been here from Japan like 8 years. Can you contact this guy?" So she contacted him, and he's a very honorable guy. He said, "Yes, I did not steal your guitar, Mr. Bachman." And this is all through Coco translating, because he can't talk to me. He doesn't speak English. Yeah. So it was very nice. And he said, "I will give you back your guitar." And I said, "Wow, you don't have to do that. I'll give you a new one." He said, "I don't want a new one, but I want its sister. You must go find one from 1957 that looks the same. I want its twin. Could be a brother or sister, doesn't matter. I want an identical twin." So I hung up. I went and found one, because I've been collecting Gretsch guitars for years. I found one in Loveland, Ohio, at Gary's Vintage Guitars, and the serial number is 3 digits away from the one that Takeshi has that was stolen. And I showed it to him on a Zoom. And so now we are going to Japan in early July, and I'm actually going to be playing Taking Care of Business. He will walk on stage. I'll probably fall to my knees in tears, because I haven't seen this guitar in 50 years. We'll trade guitars and finish the song. This is all being filmed for a Netflix movie called The Lost and Found Guitar, that all happened out of the blue from just people doing random acts of kindness in the middle of the shutdown of COVID, and us getting bad news every day, and then badder news, and then worse news, and then bad news day after day about the war and the COVID and the shutdown and the mask and everything. Out came these random acts of joy and kindness that are so astounding and amazing for me to get this guitar back. And so that's what we're doing now. So everything else has been pushed aside. In the middle of it, Tal and I did an album called Bachman and Bachman, the first father and son album to be 50-50. We're not guesting on each other's album. This is, we co-wrote it, we co-played it, we co-sang it. We recorded it in Seattle at Bear Creek Studios, where Ryan Hadlock was our producer, and he did Brandy Carlisle, and he did the Lumineers, and he's done Pearl Jam. He's a real hot producer. So we got this album coming out. They'll be kind of part of the soundtrack to the Lost and Found Magical Guitar thing, because with that guitar, I had a #1 album and single with the Guess Who, and a #1 album and single with BTO. And then Tal said, you know, the guitar was stolen, Dad. You lost your magic. And when you get the guitar back, you might be able to get another #1 song. And I said, great. So I'm writing a song called Lost and Found that's now going to close over the closing credits of the movie. And it's going to have such a push because it's being done at the Canadian consulate in Tokyo, which is going to be on Canada Day weekend. This is going to be like worldwide insanity that you can't make up or buy this. It just happened. We spoke to the Canadian ambassador 2 days ago, and he said, I want to put on a party here. We'll invite the royal family. We'll invite this guy. Holy cow, it's just amazing. So wonderful things are happening to us.
Well, much deserved, too. This is like your Excalibur, and you're getting it back. And
it is. It's they call it my magic feather. Remember Dumbo?
Yeah.
With the magic feather. This is my silver bullet, you're right, my Excalibur that I'm getting back.
Well, best of luck with that. I'm sure the #1 will happen. I remember the train wreck that was must-watch viewing for my family during that COVID break. So thank you very much for that, and I'm glad it's coming back on you. What else is happening? I know there's a big tour, but what else can we expect from you?
Well, I'm doing a long-awaited tour. It's been delayed for 2 years with Burton Cummings as Bachman Cummings. There's a big box set that just came out where they got all of the Guess Who, all of BTO's best cuts, Burton Cummings solo and my solo. It's a 6 CD or 6 album with a gigantic, 80-page book, all kind of pictures we've never even seen before.
Nice.
That's out now. You can buy it, but we're holding a lot of it back for our tour, which will be in July. We got about 2 or 3 weeks in Canada. Then if we can cross the border properly, we have a whole bunch of offers in all over the States for Bachman and Cummings to come there, because it's like getting the original Guess Who and the original BTO guys all on stage at once, which can't be done. Guys have passed away. Guys are retired. Guys can't even play anymore. Burton and I still play every day, rehearse every day. We talk to each other. We did a big gig in Winnipeg early September because it was Winnipeg's 150th birthday and Manitoba's 150th birthday. And we did it outside at a big ballpark that could have held 20,000 people. Because of COVID, they only let in 6,000. But it was really great to go there and play our hometown and do a 2-hour set of 28 hit songs where everybody sang every word in every song. Yeah. And that's what we'll be doing on tour with Bachman Cummings this summer. And then after that, I slow down because we're going to Tokyo and Japan in July, right in the end of July, my tour with Cummings. Then I come home for a few days, and then I got another tour with Cummings. And then hopefully our Netflix thing will come out, and I'll be going with Tal as Bachman promoting that. And big, heavy producers in LA are working on this with us. So it's going to be an amazing year. To have this come out of shutting down and not working for 2 years, we had so many opportunities come that fell into our lap that we just grabbed onto and hugged and not let go. And so we're going to have an amazing couple of years ahead of us.
It's a car podcast. I usually ask about vehicle maintenance and if you can give us a tip on that. But just listening to you, I mean, you're running circles around me. And most people, how do you stay so energized? It's like you don't slow down.
I've always said the 3 most important days in your life are the day you were born, the day you realized why you were born. And I was 4 or 5 when I did, and I won that little contest called King of the Saddle, where I sang a song, and I knew. Then I started playing classical violin for 10 years and switched to guitar. I knew my destiny was music. And then today, this is the most important day of my life. I'm alive. I'm talking to you, and that'll switch to tomorrow. So the day you were born, the day you knew why you were born, and then this day, because it might be your last day. I've had whooping cough, COVID, double pneumonia and everything, and I'm surviving all of this stuff. I'm at home right now talking to you. This is a wonderful time for me to be on the radio and talking to you. It's fantastic. So I was just so happy with being alive and being able to do what I started when I was 5 years of age, and that's just get on stage and play a little violin song or play a guitar song, and then you start writing your own songs, and you write 12 songs. You have one good one. You write another 12. You have another good one. Now I'm called a 12-hit wonder because I've had 6 multi-million sellings with the Guess Who and 6 with BTO. But I want to change my name to 13-hit wonder when the album comes out with Tal. It's called Shadows of Yesterday, and it's me singing about my life and Tal singing about his life, and how 25 years later, because I was 25 when he was born, how 25 years later his life has paralleled mine with being in a band, having hit records, having a wonderful wife, getting it exploded from rock and roll, because that breaks up every marriage, I'm telling you. Breaks every relationship up, and all the good things in our life and all the bad things in our life, because that's what being alive is. It's not all joy and happiness. It's like joy and sorrow, love and hate and anger and happiness. You know, sometimes I'm driving along in my car all alone, and this feeling overcomes me, and I go, wow, what is this feeling? What is this? Oh, I think it's called joy, Joy. Suddenly, everything's perfect. You're driving in your car. You're driving down your street. You're driving near the water. It's a sunny day. Your favorite song's on the radio. Everything is good right now at this moment, and you actually feel joy, which not many people feel these days, and it's a wonderful thing to feel.
I love that. Thank you for that. We've actually bought tickets for your Camrose show. We're taking my 9-year-old to his first rock show, and I think he's going to feel a lot of that same thing when he sees you two together.
Well, there's a wonderful thing that happens. I've been studying like world vibrations, how, and it goes back to good vibrations, which Mike Love wrote, and I thought, what a stupid thing to talk about. We all have a vibration, and when somebody is in a band and you get 3 or 4 guys on stage and the same vibration, it's such a magical thing, especially when they're improvising blues or jazz or even rock and roll. And when the audience gets on that vibration, and it's maybe your encore that everyone's been waiting for, and you or 10,000 people are all singing the same words and on the same vibration for that little period of time, 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, there's nothing like it in the world. It's so addictive. And that's why I keep wanting to do what I do. And I don't care if it's for 3 people. The biggest crowd I've had was 500,000 people at the SARS Festival with the Rolling Stones, AC/DC. I was there with the Guess Who. Rush was on the show, Justin Timberlake. When I went out there and yelled, I want to hear some noise, and taking care of business, and 500,000 people cheered and sang the song with me, it was the biggest high of my life. I was on top of Mount Everest and jumping up 20 feet. It was amazing. So, like I said, when you go to a concert, if you take your kids to that, and I take my kids to any concert, grandkids to any concert they want. I don't want them to go alone and get hooked up with other kids. They're doing drugs and stuff. I make sure I take them and get good seats. And last year, it cost me $30,000. I took 5 of my kids, and each of them have 5 or 6 kids. In 2 weeks, we went to see Queen, Jeff Lynne's ELO, and Paul McCartney. And we had the best seats, and we're lucky enough to go backstage and say hi to Brian May, because I know him, and Jeff Lynne, and not McCartney. But to be there with your kids and grandkids, and everybody sing, She Loves You, or Baby You Could Drive My Car, or singing an ELO song, like We Need a Xanadu. Everybody knew that because everybody loved that movie because it followed up Grease with Olivia Newton-John. To have your whole family there, like 3 or 4 decades of kids, 3-year-olds with 13-year-olds and 30-year-olds, and you're in your 60s or 70s, it's a vibration you can't get as a family unless it's through music. It really is an amazing thing.
That's a special talk today, and we took a turn, and I'm glad we did. I was glad to hear your thoughts on this, and glad to hear how happy you are. And hear that joy in your voice. So I thank you for that. Just one more question, and this might bring back some joy to you as well. Where were you the first time you heard yourself on the radio?
I was in Winnipeg with Burton Cummings driving, and These Eyes came on the radio. I'm getting verklempt. We pulled over and cried. These Eyes was our 32nd single that we had put out, that nobody played and nobody cared about. And suddenly, and we were a rock band. We did one ballad, and that became the million seller. But that started it all because we ended up rocking our faces off with No Time, an American Woman. So in a period of 2 years, we went from These Eyes to the next step up, which was Laughing, then to She's Come Undone, a little kind of jazzy thing, then to No Time, which we recorded twice, just like the Beatles. The first time was on the Guess Who Canned Wheat. It didn't turn out that well. We liked it enough that we edited it ourselves and did it again. Became a big single for the Guess Who, and that paved the way for the big rock anthem, American Woman.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, here's to many more. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. It's a thrill to talk to you, and hi to all your listeners. Thank you.
I'm not even going to lie. That was a dream come true. When I started the podcast, the number one guest on my list was Randy Bachman, and he was just on the podcast. Thanks to him. Thanks to Communal Creative Studios for making it happen. Thanks to you for listening. And it's just a hell of a day. May 6th, he's coming to Camrose, like I said, for my kid's first rock concert. Then May 8th, playing Beau's Bar and Stage, for goodness sakes. Awesome. Hey, listen, if you've got a story like that, let me know. I'm on all the socials. All right. Time for another story. This is the first time we've ever had a return guest on the Auto-Biography podcast. And I tell you, we started working with the Reynolds Alberta Museum a while ago, so I couldn't be happier to have Darren Wiberg from the Reynolds Alberta Museum back. Darren, tell us about the vehicle that moved you.
The one that we're going to talk about, the one that's consumed the most of my life here at the Reynolds Alberta Museum. It's the 1918 Wynton, a real significant machine in automotive history.
Based in Cleveland, Alexander Wynton turned his bike factory into a car factory. This was in 1896. Now, each car was hand-built with luxuries like padded seats. In 1899, they actually built a semi-truck. In 1903, Dr. Horatio Nelson Jackson drove across the U.S. in his Wynton. Now, this was a big deal. There were no paved roads across the country. There were no street signs. There were no maps to get you there. Why did he do this? Well, he wanted to drive his Wynton, and he wanted to win a $50 bet that he made. It took him 63 days to drive the Wynton from San Francisco to New York. The car in question for this interview was sold retail in 1918 for around $4,000. In today's money, that's $75,000. And bear in mind, the average wage in Canada in 1918 was $1,500 a year.
We started on it in 1999, and we actually had it as a featured part of our Roaring 20s exhibition that we put on in 2011. So that gives you some kind of idea of the commitment that was required to put that thing into the shape it is now.
Tell us about the Wynton and I guess where it stands in that history.
That's the story that no one knows. Alexander Wynton was a pioneer in the automotive industry. He was the first mass producer of cars in the North American continent. For 1900, he had already sold 50 cars. Now, you can't quote me on his first clients, but I've heard that there are people like Packard and Olds and Studebaker and DuPont, people that all ended up in the auto industry first bought Wynton cars. And actually, Henry Ford, some history with Alexander Wynton and the Wynton Car Company. Believe it or not, Ford had gone broke several times trying to build cars. He was throwing his last pennies into a car he called Sweepstake, and he raced Alexander Wynton. Like now, if you build one car, it's transportation. You build two cars, you're racing. Eh?
Yeah.
And the story goes, Wynton made the trophy and he won the race, but Ford said if he had Wynton driving his car, he would have won. But it did make some panache for Ford, and that started the Ford Motor Company. The earliest car that I've driven myself is our 1903 Rambler. And they are so primitive. They were unreliable, and they were rich people's toys, and they were really quite expensive. And that was Wynton's clientele, the very wealthy. The kind of the story with our car. It ends up in Saskatchewan. That says a little bit about the environment that was built in and the environment here in Western Canada. After World War I, farmers in Western Canada were doing fantastic. At one time, the new immigrant farmer from Saskatchewan had the economic wherewithal to buy this Wynton limousine. Actually, this car has a really unique history in that it was built at the Wynton factory twice. And we believe we have a picture here of what it looked like in 18, and then it was sent back when this fellow named Granger bought it and took it to Saskatchewan. And the renovation in 1922 cost around $2,000, I believe, and that's when you could buy a Model T for $300. This car has presence. You know, you're on stage when you're in that car because it's got this fancy Victoria top. It's got a really low belt line, so you basically can see who's ever in it from the knees up. It's an awkward thing to drive, though, because it's got this great, huge engine in it and standard steering. And, you know, you got, like, I don't fit in it, Like, you got to be 5'1" and be able to bench press 500 pounds to drive this thing, It does command a significant presence. In the renovation, it ended up with Westinghouse air springs. That this fellow from Saskatchewan knew that the roads there aren't going to be, well, that's where you're from. Anyways, he's got these, and the car has air springs. So it's got a normal leaf spring and then 4 air shocks kind of things on the ends of the springs on each corner. And it's got an onboard air compressor so you can raise the ride height. When it was initially built, it was a car that was a chauffeur-driven thing, and the chauffeur has to sit out and he doesn't get a windshield. But this Granger fellow, he wanted to drive it himself, so he had the windshield moved up onto the cowl. So we believe we have a picture of what it looked like, and there was a fellow named Katie that had it in New York first. So that wasn't uncommon at that time. When you went to have your custom car made, you sat down with an artist and they designed a body for you. You bought the chassis and then you had the body built. This one just was sent back and had the body remade. And this one, the body is really unique. It's an aluminum hand-formed body, and it's got submerged hinges. Most of that's the earliest car that I've seen where you don't see the hinges exposed on the outside of the body. That one, I have to say, was the one that made us pretty wary about what we start, Because the hyphenated name for it wasn't the Wynton, it was the damn Wynton. Well, I'll just tell you, Wayne and I brought it into the shop here in 1999. We roll it in, and Wayne gets under it with a floor jack, and we go to jack it, and the differential falls in half. And it's, oh, cripes. Here, it's been in the shop for 30 seconds, and we've already come up with a major problem that we haven't estimated. The expenses on these things are enormous, so they better have, we talked about that last time we spoke, they better have a story to tell. And this one does. It does have this fantastic Canadian story that at one time there was an immigrant was able to buy this fancy limousine and bring it to Hodgeville, Saskatchewan. So a lot of that information that we have, like I tell you about the renovation of it in 1922, that's from the family's photo albums and the family's records. And we have pictures of the car being used in Hodgeville, Saskatchewan.
Tell us about this man that owned it. Did you learn much about him?
Yeah. You know what? He was it was King Wheat that put him on the map, but he ended up being an executive in the town. He had actually had a custom home brought up from the States. It's a pretty interesting part of our Western Canadian history. That's where all these big fancy houses, they came from, is the economic buoyancy after the First World War. There was a big influx of people coming here, and some of them did very well. Of course, pretty famous what happened in 1929 as well. And then that car then would have had absolutely no value. One of the things that complicated the restoration, this thing was remade at the factory in 1922. And in 1923, Alexander Wynton says, yeah, you know what, I'm kind of getting squeezed by guys like Packard and Marmon and Cadillac and Lincoln, because he wasn't going to sell Model T. He was going to only sell these Winton Sixes. I believe the six-cylinder car that came out in 1906, I think it was. And then with the electric start coming out in 12 or 13, they could make the engines bigger. So this thing has got a massive six-cylinder engine, 525 cubic inches.
Wow.
525 cubic inches and makes 48 horsepower. So those are big, strong Clydesdale horses, though. But that was the style of these expensive cars. And when you look at the intake manifold and you look at the exhaust, the air's almost wore out before it ever gets to the engine. It's beautiful. The engine is absolutely beautiful, but the carburetor's on one side. This fancy brass plumbing goes all the way over to the other side of the engine and then into the engine, and then the exhaust on it is tiny, and it's to make them very smooth, very quiet. The engines turn at a very slow RPM. What you do to blow up an antique car like that is overspeed the engine, and it's really easy to do because, again, they're made to. You can in third gear pull out at 5 miles an hour with this thing.
Okay.
It's got all kinds of torque and not a whole lot of horsepower. Very quiet, very smooth. And then you actually, and one of the other neat things is there's a pedal on the floor where you can stomp on it, and it's called a cutout, and then you can let her roar. So that's kind of fun for waiting, but it's supposedly, if you're going up a hill or something and you need a little more power, then you step on the cutout.
Old-timey nitrous.
Yeah, there you go.
So it was an exhaust cutout.
Yeah, so it really roar,
I know a guy who did that he had a cable coming through his floorboards and he'd just pull it.
The story on the Winton company is pretty fascinating as well. Winton gets out of the car game in 1923, but he had actually built a 12-cylinder diesel engine in 1970. That's kind of where he went, was building these big compression motors, and they were called the Winton diesel. There's a fairly famous fellow in the GM world. His name is Kettering. He was the inventor of the starter, and I think he invented cellulose lacquer paint, and I had stuff to do with the automatic transmission too in the early 40s. So real significant contributor to automotive history. Anyway, these guys, Alexander Winton and Kettering, they're the nouveau riche in the 20s, and they've got yachts. Winton has a yacht, and he's put one of these Winton diesel engines in his yacht, and it, is good on fuel, and it runs forever, and all the things that you need with a marine engine. So Kettering wants to get rid of the gas motor that he's got in his yacht and put a Winton diesel in. There, the marriage between Winton and GM comes to play. The Winton car company just evolves into what is now Detroit Diesel.
Oh.
It's a fantastic study to follow the lineage on some of these companies and their family tree.
Where was the vehicle when you found it? And if you could give us I know you probably had to do a catalog worth of repairs to it, but as far as the restoration, can you give us a bird's eye view of what you had to do?
Oh God. Yeah, that's why it became the damn Winton.
Yeah.
I knew that one was going to be a big job, so we didn't do it before the museum opened. It would have just consumed everything we had. And like I say, the museum opened in 92, and we started on it in 99. And I appraised it that it would cost us somewhere in around $20,000 to restore, a little more than that, probably $25,000. Well, that's been the most expensive restoration that we've done, and it's eclipsed all the other ones. I think we could have done 10 33 Fords and 55 Nomads for what we put into that. And I'll just give you an example of one part. The most expensive radiator I'd ever dealt with was on the Airflow Chrysler. The Chrysler car has a slope nose, and the radiator's built to fit it. And that radiator cost us $6,000. So I'm going to appraise the Wynton, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to put a price tag of $8,000, $2,000 more than the most expensive radiator that we've ever had. Well, Radiator isn't chrome plated or nickel plated like we thought. It's an alloy called German silver. A German silver radiator for a 1918 Winton will set you back $17,000.
Oh.
So what I had appraised the whole car at pretty much was what one part cost.
And after that, it was done.
Oh, God, no. It was just every time we turned around, it was, oh, no, what now? Hey, and then the thing, and I did, I remember appraising it. I can only appraise what I see. This is one of the things that just popped into my head. Like I told you, we got all these holes in the dash where instruments were. Now, I talked to the Ted Granger's, I believe he was his grandson. I talked to him on the phone. I never saw him, but he was going to come here and see the car, but he passed away before we got it done. But he says, oh, yeah, I know where those instruments are. My dad took them out and put them in his hot rod, and then he rolled the hot rod, and they put it in the borrow pit and buried it. Hey, so somewhere... Somewhere in a hole in Saskatchewan is the original instruments for our 1918 Wynton.
I'm going to head out there.
The clocks, they're a Waltham clock, and they were quite famous, this name Waltham. We've got a Waltham clock in the car with Wynton written in bold letters in underneath. And now Wayne found that from a collector. I believe he found it on eBay, believe it or not. And that's what's changed now in the way we do the business. We used to do that, all of that research through Hemmings Motor News, but now the internet has been a big help. Anyway, that is the recipe: time and money. Everybody's heard of the Duesenberg, and it even is part of our not just car culture; it's our culture.
Yeah.
When people say it's a doozy,
yeah,
they don't know they're talking about a car.
Yeah.
But this Wynton is much more rare than a Duesenberg, and has probably a more significant place in automotive history, and our Duesenberg's appraised at $1.7 million, and our Wynton, we wouldn't be able to recoup the restoration cost because it's a very famous car that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have the economic panache that Duesenberg would have.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, thanks, Blake.
Yeah.
And you have a good day. We'll chat again sometime over, something like wedding dresses or high-heeled shoes.
Oh, I can't. Oh, that's my favorite. That was Darren Wiberg from the Reynolds Alberta Museum. He's awesome. A history teacher and auto body guy and mechanic. Very, very smart fella. He knows a lot, and he loves to share it. He loves working on those vehicles, too. We, of course, interviewed him about the Canada Diesel and now the Wynton, which was found after being converted from a limousine by some farmer in Saskatchewan. The Reynolds Alberta Museum is an amazing place, even if you're not a car person. Just got to be a story person. And I want to hear your story, too. Let me know. I'm on all the social media, so look me up there. I'm Blake Jackson. Thank you. As always, the Auto-Biography podcast is recorded and produced at Communal Creative Studios in Red Deer. See you next time. Until then, keep your wheels on the road and a tarp on your load.